Hey everyone, my name's Allie. I'm a museum educator at Connecticut's Old State House.
Hi, I'm Mariana Garcia. I'm a museum educator at Connecticut's Old State House, and I'm here to answer some questions.
Hi, my name is Brian Cofrancesco, and I'm the head of education and kid governor at Connecticut's Old State House.
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Sousa and I am a museum educator at Connecticut's Old State House.
Hi, my name is Jacob Orcutt, and I am the operations manager at Connecticut's Old State.
Hi, my name is Samantha Gorski, and I'm a museum educator at Connecticut's Old State House.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Tabor Conover. I'm the head of public programs and Connecticut History Day at the Connecticut Democracy Center.
Place in the Old State House is actually outside the Old State House. I like being on the lawn, looking up at the Old State House and thinking about how it's appeared to people over a few hundred years. I also like looking east from the Old State House down to the river and thinking about how lively that river once was and all of the people who have come and gone through Hartford, who have lived in Hartford, studied in Hartford, and just enjoyed Hartford. I like that the lawn is a beautiful open space in the middle of the city, and it just feels good to be there.
My favorite place in the Old State House is definitely the original Statue of Justice. I think it's so neat that she's made from wood, and she looks so impressive at the top of the stairs. I think a lot of visitors are very drawn to her whenever they see her.
I think my favorite part of the building is actually the balcony that you can see if you stand on the lawn at the Old State House. It's not often a used spot within the building, and typically you only ever see staff out there, but it's definitely my favorite spot, and you get a great view of Hartford and into East Hartford over the river.
My favorite place at the Old State House is the east-facing lawn. I think it's a beautiful view of the building itself.
I would have to say that my favorite place in the Old State House is Joseph Stewart's Museum of Curiosities. It's this really cool room that's kind of a cabinet of curiosities. It's got all sorts of crazy animals in there, a two-headed cow, a two-headed pig, a narwhal tusk, just really unusual stuff that you wouldn't expect at a historic Capitol building. I had actually done a paper on cabinets of curiosities in college, so I've always loved that room. And I definitely recommend checking it out the next time you're at the Old State
I
House.
have to say that my favorite room is the Senate chamber. I love federal style, so aesthetically, I really enjoy that room. I enjoy the yellow, it's bright, it always cheers me up when I go in. And I love the fact that it has evolved over time as our country evolves towards hopefully a more just union.
My favorite place at Connecticut's Old State House isn't actually even original to the building. It's our Mortensen Gallery and home of the Histories All Around Us exhibit. I love this exhibit because of the old artifacts of Hartford history that are found down there, especially the old GFOX sign. My whole family used to work at GFOX, so I love having that little reminder right there at work.
My favorite place in the Old State House would have to be the balcony of the House of Representatives chamber. It's not a space that visitors get to see, but it's a really quiet and special place where you get a spectacular view of the entire room, and you really get to take on the perspective of a citizen or someone who would be coming to watch the General Assembly convene in the 18 and 1900s. You know, it's really hard to choose just one favorite memory of the Old State House. And I think mine would have to be actually one that occurs every year, and that's the Connecticut's Kid Governor Inauguration Day. Inauguration Day is held every January, and it features the inauguration of the newly elected Kid Governor, as well as recognition of other students who participated in our program and have a really deep commitment to making a difference in their communities. And the Old State House is the perfect backdrop for that. You know, we bring together more than 200 fifth graders and teachers and elected officials and dignitaries all to celebrate history and civics. And to have that many people moving through the building and showing their excitement about coming to such a special event really recreates the enthusiasm and energy that would have been felt in the State House when it was actively in use back in the 17 and 1800s.
The most memorable moment at the Old State House was probably first night last year. I had never seen so many people at the building all at once, and I think it really helped me visualize what the building, how crowded it would have been back when it was still the capital of Connecticut.
One of my favorite memories about working for the last 11 years for the Connecticut Democracy Center has been the opportunity as the Connecticut History Day coordinator to travel to nationals several times and have a chance to see our students excel on the national stage. Personally, one of my most exciting experiences was the opportunity to meet filmmaker Ken Burns at a national contest a couple of years ago.
The reason that I applied to work as a museum educator at the Old State House is because I love American history and I love civics. The Old State House is where those two things come together. I also love Hartford and Connecticut history. I'm from West Hartford. I went to college in New London, Connecticut, and now I live here in the city of Hartford.
I've been working at Connecticut's Old State House since 2014, and I applied for my job really because of our mission of where history and civics intersect. My interest and my background's really in architectural history and museums, so what better place to work than a 1796 National Historic Landmark that's also a museum. But that is also combined with my personal life and a lot of my interest in volunteering and giving back to the community and civic engagement. So this job was a really unique one in that it pulled together those two interests of history and civics that I was living in my own life and let me do it in my professional life.
So I applied to my job at Connecticut's Old State House as a museum educator after seeing the listing on the New England Museum Association's website. I was working in a museum in Massachusetts. I was a guide up there. I loved my job, but I wanted to do something different. And so I applied for the job at the Old State House. Had a crazy interview process, interviewed over a Thursday and a Friday, and then the following Monday found out that it was mine. And I was super excited. So I planned to move. I came down here and I've been working at the Old State House ever since September 2014 and have loved it.
I love Connecticut history, and one of the pieces of history that I love is African American history. So I wrote my thesis in college on the public memory of slavery in Connecticut. And one of the stories that I focused on was the story of the Amistad Rebellion. Now, the trials following the Amistad Rebellion to decide whether the Amistad Africans deserved the right to go home to Africa began in the Old State House. So that was a huge draw to me originally when I applied for the job. I couldn't be happier working as a museum educator at the Old State House.
What is my favorite moment from Connecticut history? That's a hard one. There are a lot of really interesting and amazing things that have happened in our state. And I think one of the things that I love about Connecticut is that I think people underestimate our little state and look to other states as, oh, well, history happened there. But truly, history happened here in Connecticut. Personally, one of my favorite memories or my favorite aspects of Connecticut history actually happened at the site of the Old State House. And that's the meeting of Count Rochambeau and General George Washington. The meeting between the French and American commanders was so important to the fighting of the Revolutionary War. And it was vital to have that French support. And so I think that is one of my most favorite aspects of Connecticut history.
Outside of my work at Connecticut's Old State House, I really love the history of my hometown of Meriden. And a lot of my independent research focuses on a 19th century industrialist named Jedediah Wilcox and the house that he built. And so my favorite moment in Connecticut history would have to be the 1870s, the time when Jedediah Wilcox was most active in his industries here in Meriden, but also a time where our community was growing and becoming a major center for manufacturing in Connecticut.
Besides the Old State House, my favorite places in Hartford are Hartford Stage and the Bushnell. I was a theater kid growing up and saw a lot of performances at the Bushnell and a few even at Hartford Stage over the years. And I love that they bring Broadway straight to Hartford, either through the Bushnell's Broadway series or the fact that Hartford Stage is a Tony Award-winning theater, bringing us shows like Anastasia and A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder.
So one of my favorite places in Hartford is actually right here where I am on this kind of rainy day here at Keeney Park Golf Course. Keeney Park itself is really a cool place. It was designed by the Olmsted brothers. They were children of Francis Law Olmsted, who designed Bushnell Park as well as Central Park in New York City. And the golf course here was designed by Devereaux Emmett as well as Robert Jack Ross, who was a city engineer here in Hartford. So it's really cool that it's got this history of being designed by one of the great golf architects of the Golden Age, as well as a local city employee here in Hartford. They recently redid this golf course a couple years ago, and it's beautiful. But really my favorite thing about it is just the drive in. This is a 700-acre park right here in Hartford, kind of at the outskirts of the north part of town. And I would really recommend coming to the park, especially from the Barber Street side, and just driving around, hanging out in the park, bring a picnic. It's a really neat place that's right here in Hartford, and I think a lot of people don't know about it, so definitely check it out.
So besides the old State House, my favorite spot in Hartford definitely would be Bushnell Park. Every once in a while, we do have to go over to the Capitol, and to walk through Bushnell Park is always my favorite part of that walk over to the other building. It's beautiful, I think, in every single season, and it's one of the things that I miss the most about working from home right now instead of being able to be in Hartford.
I had a lot of interactions with the old State House before I started to work there. When I was a kid, we moved to Connecticut from New Hampshire, and we used to take the bus into Hartford all the time. And so I spent a lot of time on Central Row waiting for the bus home, looking at the side of the old State House. I also remember rushing by it to get over to Fox's and Sage Allen's and Corvette's and all the other stores that were on the other side of the old State House. And I also remember hearing really neat stories from my mother and my uncles about Hartford, growing up in Hartford, and about the old State House. One of my favorites was my uncle telling me about when he was a little boy, he delivered the afternoon paper, and he would actually go to the old State House to pick it up and pick up the papers, and then he would sell them as he walked back home, going by the train station and the Capitol. And I always liked that connection to the old State House. And a lot of times when I'm there, I think about my uncle as a little kid going there to pick up his papers.
So my experiences at the old State House before I started there, I really just have one that I can point to. Back in high school, I was part of our school's a cappella choir, and we actually used to go around the state singing Christmas carols and stuff. And one of the places that we went to carol was the old State House. And I remember even then in high school, I loved historic buildings, so it was really cool seeing this really neat historic building in downtown Hartford with its green still intact. I loved that it had a green space outside. I think that's something really special about the old State House. So that's really my biggest memory is just coming there in high school and caroling on the front steps.
Before working at the old State House, I had a lot of experiences in the building. As a little girl, my grandmother used to take me and my younger brother to the building pretty frequently on our trips to Hartford. Living on the bus line, she would take us on a city bus and we'd go to the old State House to explore Hartford history before going for a ride on the Bushnell Carousel and then going to get a book at Buck-a-Book. And along with that, I am an alumni of Hartford Public Schools, and of course that means a lot of field trips to the old State House, and field trips that I now teach, which is really cool.
Thing about the old State House is that so many large and small things happened there, and so many people went through the doors, and it impacted the things that happened inside, impacted so many people's lives in so many ways, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways. You know, I've worked in a lot of historic houses where you can talk about the daily life of people who lived in those homes and what life was like for them, how their lives compare to our own or are different from our own. Interpreting an old State House is a little bit different. You're not talking about daily life, but you're talking about the things that impacted daily life. And I think that's one of the things I like best about the old State House. It has broad and deep stories that touch all of us and have affected people in the past. The things that happen there affect us now, and they will affect people far into the future.
My favorite thing about the old State House is that it is the heart of Hartford and even the heart of Connecticut. It's one of those things that really unites us all as nutmeggers. No matter if you're from Hartford or Trumbull or anywhere else in the state, most likely you visited on a field trip, or maybe you work downtown now or live downtown and you go to have lunch or you walk your dog on the property. It's always been there and always will.
So I'd have to say my favorite thing at the old State House isn't so much a thing as it is just kind of the building itself and really the setting of the building. I've always really loved how the old State House is this beautiful historic building in the middle of downtown amongst Hartford's biggest and tallest skyscrapers and buildings. I've always kind of loved that juxtaposition. So I think my favorite thing about the old State House is probably its setting right in downtown Hartford.
bizarre experiences myself, but a lot of my colleagues have. And when it comes to really old buildings like the Old State House, I think it stands to reason that it might be haunted.
One of the most frequent questions that anyone working in museums gets is whether or not a building is haunted. I personally have not encountered any ghosts at Connecticut's Old State House, and to be honest, I'm glad of that. But I do think buildings have an aura about them. I've worked in history museums for the last 20 years, and I do think that there is a sense of that you get at buildings from how they were used and what experiences went on there.
The question of whether or not the Old State House is haunted is one we get pretty often. And we did have the ghost hunters team come to investigate before I actually even started. And although their investigation came back inconclusive, our team has walked through the building in the evenings or at night just to see what we feel or experience. And I am of the belief that the building does seem to be haunted. My most common haunting experience has been being in my office in the evening or at night and hearing the elevator suddenly called to a different floor. Or once or twice I even heard a voice that echoed in different parts of the building. So, it's up to everyone's individual opinion and beliefs, but I do think that there is some sort of presence in our building, and it actually brings me comfort from time to time because I don't think whatever might be there is there to hurt us, but rather is there to keep an eye on the building, which is a nice feeling to know that people from the past may be sticking around to make sure that the Old State House remains safe and protected.
I really don't know whether the Old State House is haunted or not. It's so old that it very well could be, but I've never had a personal experience where I felt like the building was haunted.
One of the big questions people always have about the Old State House and every historic house, is it haunted? Now, I'm probably one of the best people to answer that question because I spent 3 days and 2 nights in the Old State House with the ghost hunters. And it was really interesting to see how they looked for ghosts in the State House. And in the end, if you watch the show, you'll see that their results were inconclusive. They weren't really sure if it was haunted or not. For a lot of the time that they were looking for ghosts upstairs, I was down in the lowest level in my office doing work through the night. And I know that one night, many times throughout the evening, I would hear this sound that went, and it certainly seemed like something supernatural was going on. And it was early in the morning when I was hearing this, and I wasn't sure what it was, but eventually I realized that my office is right next to the restrooms. So whenever any of the ghost hunters went into the restrooms and flushed the toilet, I was hearing, oh, coming from that flushing. So their results were inconclusive. Mine were pretty conclusive.
So is the Old State House haunted? That's a question we get a lot. I guess the first question there is, do you believe in ghosts or not? I don't know if I'm ready to make a definitive answer on that or not. There's definitely been some weird stuff at the Old State House. You'll hear elevator noises when nobody else is in the building. Doors will close in empty rooms. So some strange stuff will happen for sure. I've never felt worried about going to work. I don't think it's a scary place, but whether or not it's haunted, as I guess, is really up to your interpretation.
And in my opinion, I do believe that there's weird things going on with the building. We've had the elevator chime when no one has pressed the button to call for it. We've heard noises through the building that can't really be explained, fun things like that. So I do believe that there's something weird going on in the building, might be haunted. We've even gone ghost hunting in the building, try and figure it out, and have had some crazy things happen.
Yes, I think the Old State House is haunted. Back when I was a volunteer in high school and even during my internship in 2014, I used to hear stories from former staff members about all the desks in the House of Representatives being pushed together or door handles jingling. It's pretty common knowledge that people who live across the street in some of the apartments have seen figures walking back and forth across the window when the building is dark and clearly empty for the night. Personally, I've had doors close on me, and we've all seen the elevators be called to floors where there's nobody around.
There were two different meeting houses on the site where the old State House sits today. Before 1796, when the old State House was finished. There were two meeting houses. They were both made of wood. The first one was built around 1636 when Thomas Hooker and his other transplants came here to Hartford. They built the first meeting house in 1636.
My favorite part of my job is definitely getting to talk to people from out of town. There's so much history about the old State House and about Hartford that people never realize or expect, and I just love that feeling of surprising someone with a new fact or a new story.
My favorite part of my job is getting to work at the Old State House, one of the most incredible buildings in all of Connecticut, and getting to work with an outstanding team of colleagues to really bring its story to life and to make it relevant for all the visitors who come to see us. If you're looking for a way to give back and to support Connecticut's Old State House, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend about us. Whether you encourage them to come for a tour, or to bring a group of students for a field trip, or if they want to come for one of our conversations at noon, or another public program like the farmers market or concerts, or to participate in the Connecticut's Kid Governor or Connecticut History Day program. You can do so much to help us raise the awareness of our museum and our programming just by telling someone about what we do and encouraging them to visit us online or our website or coming in person one day to learn more.
How would I encourage people to get involved with the Old State House? Well, probably my colleagues would say my favorite thing to encourage people to volunteer is to volunteer as a judge for the Connecticut History Day program. Every year we have 6 regional and a state contests that are held in the spring, and we need hundreds of wonderful volunteers to serve as judges for those contests. So I would encourage people to sign up and to judge for Connecticut History Day, and we hope to see you soon.
What's the best way to support the Old State House? Well, I'm probably going to give an answer that's a little different than what you would expect. I would say, sure, come to our programs, come to a tour of the Old State House, come to the farmers market, come and enjoy all of the different things that it has to offer. Also talk to people about it. They're talking to people about the Old State House right now. Talk to people about it and think about the role that a place like a State House plays in your life and could play in your life. I think one of the best ways to support the Old State House is to be an active citizen, to do your best to speak up, to know about the issues, and we'll help you with that as much as we can. But I think that's a really good way to support the place.